You know something I've noticed? People are kind of just bad at this game sometimes. Look, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to whatever, but I'm kind of shocked. I have to take my glasses off for this. I'm kind of shocked when I see what happens with a Pokemon when it gets a nerf or a small buff. And I'm just starting to think that people can't win with things unless they're completely broken. Like, truly, people have a hard time winning with a Pokemon when it receives a minor nerf. Buzzwole, I think, is a great example. Hi, everybody. Jake, your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw. I just needed to get into this a little bit because I see a Pokemon like Phalanx get nerfed. And to be fair, these are reasonable nerfs for Phalanx. And its win rate drops. Hold on. I had it in front of me. Its win rate drops 9.5% overall for the week. 9.5%. It's so massive. The swing is so incredible. Or Tyranitar. Tyranitar got nerfed. I also have something to say about Tyranitar, which is just, I'm very confused with how people are playing this Pokemon, but Tyranitar got nerfed and its win rate dropped considerably. One of the biggest reasons its win rate dropped, by the way, people are playing Dark Pulse Ancient Power. 40% of them are playing Dark Pulse Ancient Power, and it's winning less than 40% of the time. Tyranitar got a 5% win rate decrease from its nerfs. These things, like, when I see numbers like this on some of these changes, I'm just kind of blown away. Now, when I see Ceruledge going up 5%, I'm also blown away by that. I'm a little blown away by it because Ceruledge was a great Pokemon that you could easily win with. But now all of a sudden, it's actually winning because it's finally turbo broken. And I just think we're in this weird place in Unite where something is looked at as awful once it gets a small nerf, and the community plays like it. I'm not sure what's coming first here, the chicken or the egg. Like, I don't know if Buzzwole is really that bad, or if, as I'm feeling about it, it's not that Buzzwole is that bad, it's just that the people who are playing it truly can't win unless something is unfair, right? Like, unless something is actually unfair, people are not winning with it. And then there are those like niche Pokemon where they don't get a lot of play, but they consistently win, right? Like, I look at something like Dodrio. Dodrio's never really a high pick rate. It's like a 6% pick rate. It's still over 50%. Same thing with Zarina. It's like a 7% pick rate, but it's still over 50%. However, the top and bottom of our roster, the highest win rates and the lowest win rates, are dominated by Pokemon that were either broken or are no longer as broken. It's weird, isn't it? It just makes me think that it's extremely hot and cold with what we play in this game. You know, like, very similar to most situations. I think it's called the Pareto distribution. Let me see the exact name for it. There's like a name for what I'm talking about right now.
A few moments later.
Yeah, it's a probability law distribution, only has 2 parameters, blah, blah, blah. The idea basically is that everything sort of gathers to some of the biggest things, right? Like, all of the music in the world is written, like, all the music that's listened to in the world is written by a small amount of artists. All of the wins in Pokemon Unite are by a small amount of Pokemon. All of the money in the world is held by a small amount of people. And Pokemon Unite just seems to follow this to a T for whatever reason. If something is fine, people lose with it. And then it's turbo broken, and then finally people are winning. And if something goes from turbo broken back down to fine or even pretty good, it falls off a cliff. It just completely falls off a cliff. It's so bizarre to me. It's so bizarre. So I just had to talk about this because every week I see the win rates go up and down, and in a stable meta, they're mostly stable, right? But when we get a patch, we see some really interesting shifts. And it's not that I'm surprised to see Ceruledge so high. I think more what happens is not the Pokemon that jump to the top for me, it's the Pokemon that fall all the way to the bottom. And it's weird because you wouldn't think that you wouldn't think that every player who was playing a Pokemon that was overtuned was solely relying on that Pokemon's overtunedness to win them games. Like when I was playing Ceruledge before the buffs, I had a 60-some% win rate. I'm sure if I play it now, my win rate will be even higher because it was buffed. But people playing Ceruledge before were sub 50%. They just couldn't win games with it. And I do think it sort of speaks to the overall skill in the game, which I think for whatever reason has felt kind of lower than it's been in a very long time. Now, I'm sure we have new players cycling in all the time, and I know that from the heights of like Mewtwo Y and stuff like that, we had a lot of probably experienced, very seasoned players drop off. But I guess I'm always a little shocked at the level we are playing this game at, generally as a community. And I don't know if it's that people maybe have really bad macro. So what I mean by that is there are kind of two like things that you're doing. Like I think about this from real-time strategy games, which is where MOBAs came from, right? You have kind of two things that you're focusing on in a real-time strategy game. You have your macro and your micro. So your macro is your base building, and you're making sure that you're controlling your economy, and you're building your units. And then you have your micro, which is controlling your units. And when I look at a game like Unite, when I look at a MOBA, I think of your micro, obviously, is controlling your unit, how good you are at winning fights with Ceruledge. And then I think of your macro as, of course, what are your decisions in the game? What lane are you pushing? Where are you? When? Why are you at this objective compared to this objective? How are you fighting at Ray? Etc., etc., etc. And I've found personally that I think because of the macro decisions I make, my swings with my Pokemon are not super high. So it's not like I have a ton of Pokemon that I have like a 30% win rate on and a ton that I have a 70% win rate on. It's more like a lot of my Pokemon are at that realm where they're like around 50 or maybe up to 60-ish or something like that. I feel like I sit in that realm because of macro decisions that are being made. And when I see the win rates fluctuate in such extreme ways, while I understand the positive swings, like I understand when something gets a nice buff, everyone starts playing it, they maybe kind of figure out what's going on, it's easier to pick up KOs. The thing that I'm most surprised with, again and again and again, are the nerfs. Like the slight nerfs that change a Pokemon's win rate drastically. Blastoise right now, it was nerfed a little while back. I just look at it and I'm scratching my head. Blastoise has a 44% win rate. And yeah, I do think that Pokemon could use some buffs. I think it was over nerfed, but this thing is just like through the floor, absolutely through the floor. And then you see a Pokemon like Tyranitar drop 5%. Again, Phalanx, who is still pretty dang good, drops almost 10% in win rate from that change, which is just, I mean, super surprising to me. And I think if your Pokemon fall that hard, yes, sometimes things are over nerfed. It does happen. But I would really encourage you as a player to start focusing on the macro of the game, making sure you're showing up to fights, making sure you're showing up with Unite moves. I'm starting to think that we have players that would normally in any if the meta was flatlined, right? If there was somehow 50%, which can never happen. There's so many variations. But if the meta was somehow flatlined, I'm convinced that we have players who would like consistently be at 30% win rate or something like that. Because I think our decision making in these games is actually pretty poor. Anyway, it's just something I was thinking about as I was looking at yet another week where the meta shifts and something gets a nerf and it completely disappears from being a Pokemon with any win rate at all. I would love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think? Why do things swing that hard? Why is it that someone cannot win with a Pokemon that's pretty dang good? Like, it has to be turbo busted. I think part of it is maybe it's just not on people's radar, but I think in general we have a real macro issue, and like, I think people are not making good decisions. That's the biggest thing when I look at this. Is I just think the win rates can't swing that wildly without people just not making good decisions on some of these Pokemon. Again, I want to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I know it was a little bit of a rant. I'm sorry this video was less structured. It's just a little stream of consciousness, basically, but it's just something I saw it and I'm like, why is it this wild? All right. I love you guys. We did it.